Hello and welcome. And there's Penny. She just decided to get into my lap just a couple of minutes ago, and I decided we'll see how long this takes. Hopefully, she won't start barking like crazy in the middle of this. But anyway, we'll see what happens. So I figured I'd either do this or just wait, so at least you get a good view of the back of her head. Anyway, um, this particular quote came from Joyce Meyer. I guess it could be Meyer, Meyer. But I thought it's I don't know, kind of like fun in a sense. I just appreciate this particular quote. I don't know why. It just I don't know, maybe it's just my weird sense of humor today. But anyway, a bad attitude is like a flat tire. If you don't change it, you won't go anywhere. And I think that makes pretty much a lot of sense as far as the flat tire. The fact that maybe you won't go anywhere if you continue to have a bad attitude may be a little bit more difficult to grasp. I think it makes sense, but I don't know that we realize it at many times when we're in the middle of an attitude. I say this is something along the line of getting up and having something go wrong in the first thing in the morning, and you say, "Oh, gee, it's going to be a bad day." When we have a bad attitude and we think that things are just not working right, we tend to start looking for things that are bad attitudes and not working right. We don't tend to turn around and look at the things that are going to be good or change that particular attitude. Hence, we don't go anywhere because we just keep finding all the negatives. So, like I said, with you get up in the morning and the coffee pot didn't go on or some such thing like that, and then you say, "Oh, it's going to be a bad day. This is going to go wrong." And other things happen. You say, "Oh, I knew it was going to be a bad day." And then this is going to be a bad day. And then that's going to be a bad day. And you start looking at things from the standpoint that things are going to be negative. And so that when things are going to be negative, you decide that, they're going to continue to be negative and you're never going to end up doing anything that's going to end up changing that particular attitude. And at the end of the day, when you've had a series of negative things go wrong or have happened, you say, "I knew it was going to be a bad day." Then you get into the hopefully not get into rather the habit of thinking that, "Oh, gee, I wonder if tomorrow's going to be a bad day." At which point, then tomorrow gets to be a bad day, and the whole cycle continues. We can break that. As in this particular quote, if you don't change that flat tire, if you don't start looking at things from a different standpoint, that negativity is going to keep going. It's more obvious, again, always more obvious when you see it in other people. But when you see somebody else in a negative attitude, and you say, "Well, cheer up, it's got to get better." And they say, "No, it's not. No, it's not." You get that sense that, to some degree, that they don't want to or that they don't believe it. But why do you try and convince somebody that things are going to get better? What's the purpose that you have? Do you really believe that things are gonna get better? Because if you do, can you apply that to yourself when things start going wrong? Because once you start thinking in terms of changing that bad attitude and start looking at the more positive, you'll start seeing more positive things. This is somewhat like, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, probably lots of times, like you buy a new car and then you drive off the lot and suddenly all you see is that particular car. You never saw it before until you got it and made it your own and you drove off the car, drove, drove off the lot. Get that. Anyway, or we could take a look at just what happened. I could sit here and say, "Oh, gee, she started to bark in the middle of this. Do I really need to go this and start this all over again? And it's a bad attitude, and it's a lousy afternoon, and all these things happen to me." And what's likely to happen? I'm going to again start seeing other things. I will probably give off negative vibes, which Penny is probably going to get sense because dogs do sense things like that. We all tend to sense things out. We're just not always as aware of it or conscious of it. And things are just going to go downhill. If I start looking for the positive or I start looking for the good side to things, we're more likely to see them and the mood is going to change. Because if you stop to think about it, if you stop to think about it, there's all sorts of things going on in the world at any one moment in time, good and bad. Many of those things are essentially neutral because what's good for you, and so everything's all sorts of stuff is going on. You're in a sense picking and choosing, you're selecting, you're going to Target or something and picking things off the rack and saying, "I like this, I don't like this." So you're, in a sense, got all sorts of things that are available to take a look at, and you're deciding whether something's good or bad at that particular moment. Now, something might not fit you, something may fit somebody else, the barking may annoy you, whatever it is. But that basically is neutral. What you're looking at essentially is the way you're looking at it given that specific thing at that particular moment in time. So no one thing is necessarily, usually is not necessarily bad. Okay. It's what you're thinking about it. But if you take a look at it as being negative, and I told you she crawled under things and there she goes again. Um, so let's just, she's a little burrower. That's pretty much why I put things on there so she can burrow under them. So now you've seen more about my dog than you've ever seen before. Hopefully it's not a problem. Anyway, but I could take a look at that and say, oh, gee, she ruined this whole thing. I'm going to take a look at it and say, oh, well, if you don't like it, you don't like it. But I'm not necessarily going to say she's ruined my particular broadcast today. So that's where I'm coming from when I'm saying you need to look at the attitudes and is there something you can change and look at the perspective, maybe just tilt it ever so slightly and tilt it ever so slightly again and again and again until you get to the point that it's not quite as bad. And then you'll start having a better day. Then again, if you start tilting it in the other direction, you could have a worse day if you think about things that are going to happen that could be negative. So the whole idea is changing the tire. Can you think in terms that you're going to change the attitude and make the day? If you say, oh, I don't want to do this, it's going to take too long, I don't like it, it's boring. Is there something about that task that you can at least think in terms of it being up? Maybe not necessarily positive, but at least neutral. One thought could be is if I do it now, it's done and it's not hanging over my head. Because that's what happens with a lot of our negative tasks. We don't want to do them, so it's always hanging over our heads and we're trying to get rid of it, but we know that we still got to do it. And so we just keep feeling worse and worse and worse. Maybe one positive thing is let me do it and I'll get it over with so it's no longer hanging over my head. That may not necessarily be what you would consider positive, but at least it's not negative. So again, think in terms that you do have control over your attitude and to a great degree, start to say the things that happen to you in life. And in a sense, yes, and in a sense, no. You do have control over the way you approach them. Because again, many of those things that happen to you are going to be relatively negative. They're going to happen to a whole bunch of people. How are you choosing to react to it? Are you going to look at it negatively? Are you going to look at it neutrally? Or are you going to look at it positively? If you look at it negatively, you've got that flat tire and you're not going to go anywhere until you make that change. Now, I hope this makes sense. I hope the idea maybe perhaps could be, it was interesting that I had this particular quote today and Penny decided she was going to get involved in my broadcast today. We'll see what happens. So if you didn't like it, oh well, I apologize for that. But again, that is part of my life and it's probably part of many of yours as well, whether it be dogs or cats or children or spouses or something else. But I hope this was helpful and gave you something to think about as we go into the next week. So let me know what you think about it and let me know what you think about Penny. And we'll just stay in touch and we'll chat with you later. Bye.